Hello, my friends. Welcome to my channel one more time. My name is Bianca, and I am here to share with you the Chad Daybell trial, which is a very difficult trial to watch. But mainly, the reason why I am so interested is because the whole mind, it really interests me. And the fact that this guy may be a psychopath is interesting to me. What is a psychopath? Is someone who has a different brain than other people. The psychopaths usually, the most of the tests were done with inmates in prison, and they are tested as far as their brains, which areas light up when certain subjects are brought up. And a lot of the studies have shown that when it talks about the suffering of other people, psychopaths don't have the emotion that most people have in their frontal cortex and in the other areas of the brain. We have shown here images of a brain of a psychopath. And I do believe that some of these trials that we have been watching lately do offer a lot of evidence that people out there that were living in the world, just like anybody else, could be psychopaths. One of my favorite books that has really changed my life is called Psychopath Free. It's a book that it's really focused on relationships and emotional abusive relationships. And it really shows you a lot of the traits, red flags, so that you can catch these people if they are in your life. And yes, they do walk around among us. But on this trial, what we're trying to do is just rewatch the trial, see the things that come up, the evidence, what is our opinion about it, and what do we think about Chad at the end of the trial. Most of us know that Lori Vallow, his wife, is already in prison and she was found guilty of all the counts, including the deaths of her own children, JJ and Tylee. Now, Chad is on trial for the deaths of the two kids and also his ex wife. A lot of people have died in this story, including Lori's ex husband as well. So these two people have met and they became extremely connected through a story that Chad propagated as being a spiritual connection. Chad and Lori, they were both part of the LDS church, and Chad, self published author and self proclaimed prophet, used to go around teaching seminars, teaching classes, having private little groups in his or her house, and propagating the message that he was the leader of the last 144,000 chosen by God, and that him and Lori had a mission together. So it's a lot of information that will come up, and it's very unusual. But in the case of Lori, from what I've seen so far, it seems like she actually believed him. I'm not sure what her position is anymore. But as far as Chad goes, to me, he has a lot of signs of psychopathy, including the need for control, power, money, sex, and the fact that he would lie with no impunity. He would lie with impunity. That the fact that he just manipulated others to do his bidding. He would always pretty much keep himself out of the situation, but he would be behind the scenes every time. So let's see what this day has to offer us in court. We're going to start here, and I'm going to share the screen so that we can watch this together. Here you go. And hopefully you guys can hear it. Let's see. I think this is when
Thank you. The state
it
calls me
starts
balance.
from yesterday.
All right.
I'll also leave the chat going here so that we can see what everybody is saying. Where is the image, guys? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Court resumes shortly. I don't know what's going on. Let me try to fast forward.
As States Exhibit 126
that
is
loud.
a Verizon business records affidavit.
All right. Any objection on 126?
Okay,
Again,
text
Judge, it's
messages.
stipulated exhibit.
Sounds
All right,
like text
126 is
messages.
admitted.
Juicy
On
text
one-
messages.
What's your next one, Mr. Wood?
127, another Verizon business records affidavit.
Are they
All
just
right, is
answering?
that admitted by
things?
stipulation, Mr. Pryor?
Yes, Your Honor.
127 is admitted.
128, another Verizon business records affidavit.
All
Oh
right,
my
will that be admitted by
goodness.
stipulation, Mr. Pryor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
128 is
let me
admitted.
fast forward a little bit because
States
they're just
Exhibit
gonna
120.
count
Just
the
do an investigation.
exhibit's numbers. I'm not interested.
Have you used those techniques successfully in the past?
Yes, I've used those techniques
Okay, here we
on
go.
hundreds of occasions
Testimony.
to locate violent fugitives, to locate missing kids, missing persons, and really just a gamut of different investigations that the FBI conducts
How long have you been a member of CAST?
since October of 2019.
And how long have you been using cellular records in investigations?
Going to speed this up
So I've
a
been
little
using
bit.
cellular records as a part of my investigations, both with the FBI and with the Marshal Service since 2007.
Do you assist other agencies with this type of cellular analysis?
I do. I regularly provide assistance to agencies, local, federal, and state throughout the country.
How do those investigators usually come to contact you?
So usually as a part of CAST, we also do a lot of training and presentations. So I could be contacted directly by someone that participated in one of those trainings, or law enforcement can reach out directly to our unit, and then cases could be assigned to me that way as well.
I believe you might have already said this, but just in case, how many members does CAST have nationwide?
It fluctuates, but approximately 70 to 80.
How does one get selected to be on CAST?
So there's an application process that you would put in to be a member of the unit, and then there are multiple trainings that span approximately 240 hours before you would be certified. And those are in the form of multiple training iterations that start with our CAST Basic, which is a 2 to 3 day training in which you would learn kind of from the foundation of what we do and not using any type of software to assist you. Taking cellular records, and like I talked about earlier, putting those onto a map based on a specific date and time that may be of interest to investigation. If you complete CAST Basic and you're invited to attend the next training, you would go to our CAST Advanced. That's a 1 week training where it gets a little bit more into the specifics for each provider that are the major providers throughout the United States, what their records look like, any nuances that might be a part of their records. And then also that's where we start implementing practical scenarios to where we're given a problem in the class and we have to do a report based on whatever that problem is, and then it's evaluated by instructors. On completion of CAST Advanced, you would go to, at the time I went, what was called our field training exercise, which is where you have approximately 3 days where you're given multiple problems. You don't get any support from instructors, and you have to solve those problems within a specific time and then present your findings on those. On completion of that, we have an additional 4 weeks where you would go to our what we call Certification 1 and Certification 2. As a part of that training, we have instruction from professors in the field of radio frequency. We have presentations from all the major providers, not only by their legal compliance representatives, but also by their engineers who set up the networks. They provide kind of an overview of how each specific network is set up. We went to see a network switch to see the actual physical infrastructure associated with cellular technology. And then upon completion of that, we're given a written test that we have to pass. And then the last 2 weeks, we do instruction on what's called drive testing, which is taking measurements of what the true cellular environment looks like for a particular area. And then we have a problem that we have to solve again that we take all the way to a mock court scenario that we have to present. Upon completion of all of that, instructors meet, discuss each candidate, and then if you pass, you would be considered a certified member of CAST.
And are you a certified member of CAST?
Yes.
So you completed all that training you just discussed?
Yes, sir.
He's like,
So-
whatever
and
you said. Did you do
completed
it?
successfully?
Yes, sir.
Good.
I want to talk to you a little bit about cell towers for a minute. What, based on your knowledge and your training of cellular networks, can you explain to the jury what a cell tower does?
Sure. So
What
a
is
cell
a
tower
cell
is constantly
tower?
emitting radio frequency for a given
Where
area.
is the witness?
And so if you think about it from the standpoint of whenever you're going to make a call on your phone, the important part is you want to be able to talk to somebody that's a great distance away. So phones work very similar to what a portable radio that you could go buy at an electronics store would works in the same way. So if you take that portable radio, you can communicate to somebody, but you're limited on the distance that you can communicate with them. So if our cell phone was only able to communicate down the street, it wouldn't necessarily be relevant for our day-to-day life. So what a cell tower does is it allows the cell tower to the cellular phone, instead of communicating directly with another phone, to communicate with that tower. Once it does that, that signal can be transmitted down the street or throughout the world to allow you to make a phone call to anywhere that
which is
a
amazing.
cellular phone has
Thank
service.
God.
What is the range of a cell tower?
So the range of a cell tower primarily depends on the area. So whenever network engineers are creating the network, they're ultimately doing it to support population or users of their network. So in an area like Boise, where there's a pretty high population, you'll see a lot of cell phone towers, and those towers are generally going to provide service out to the next closest tower. So like I said, in Boise, where you have a large population to support, the footprint of what that cellular tower is going to provide coverage to is smaller. When you start talking about Rexburg, which is a more rural area, there's less towers. So those towers are going to go out farther distances just because of the fact that the population is less dense there.
So is it fair to say that cell towers are responsible for providing coverage to a particular area?
Yes, networks are designed to provide coverage to its users.
And can you explain what a sector of a tower is?
Yes. So a traditional cell phone tower, if you're looking at it from the top and think of it as that radio frequency is going out in all directions, almost as a circle. So to optimize their network, that tower is divided into 3 different sectors. So again, if you think about that circle and cutting it into a pie of 3 equal pieces, that's what a sector represents. So there's antennas on that tower that basically provide coverage to 120 degrees away from that tower. So if you think about that circle being 360 degrees, divide that by 3, that gives you the 3 equal sectors that cover approximately 120 degrees of that circle.
And can you briefly summarize for the jury how a cell phone engages with a cell tower?
Yes. So your cell phone, even in your pocket when you're not talking on it, is constantly scanning the environment to look for which tower and sector are providing the strongest signal. So that way, if you do need to make a call or receive a text message, your phone is already aware of what tower and sector it's going to utilize for that interaction.
Okay. And how does a phone determine, or how is it determined, what tower a cell phone connects with?
So the phone is making that decision. And that's probably the most important part to remember that. The phone, whenever it's scanning and it's looking at the cellular environment that it's in, it's keeping a list of what that strongest tower is at any given time. So the cell phone selects the strongest tower and sector to begin an interaction with the network for whatever it is, via voice call, email, whatever that might be.
And will that strongest tower always be the closest tower?
It can be, but also there could be obstructions in the way that it might choose a cellular tower that's a little bit farther away. So it's going to choose the strongest signal, not necessarily the closest.
Do cellular companies record the activity of each of their customers?
They do. So if you think about, maybe 15 years ago, whenever you got a cell phone bill, and not only did it include the amount that you owed the provider,
What?
you also had a list of all the different calls that were made on that specific account.
Who's recording what?
So
Say
whenever
what?
you're looking at the recordings of what a cellular provider keeps on the
What?
specific account, that's what we're talking about. So that could be the date and time, the duration of a specific event, the
My
direction, whether
search
you received an inbound
history?
or outbound call. And that's on your call detail record. The difference with the records that what law enforcement look at is it also includes columns for location information. So
Yeah,
what that
they have
includes is the
everything,
tower
guys.
and
Don't think
sector that
for a
was utilized
second
for a specific
that
interaction
you
that you
got
had with
any
the provider.
privacy. They have
And I
everything.
think you used the phrase call detail records.
Yes,
Is that the phrase usually associated with the records that the cellular companies keep?
it is. Yes.
Mm,
What pieces of, you kind of went over this, but what pieces of information are typically found in a call detail record?
So typically, just like on the old phone bill, you'll see a date and a time. You'll see what type of transaction, whether it was a voice or a text message. You'll see the duration if it was a voice
Notes,
call. You'll
picture.
see the number that was called or the number that called into the account. And then, like I mentioned, with the call detail records we're looking at, we'll also see columns that give us location information.
Does the information captured on call detail records vary by provider?
It does. Most providers are going to capture the majority of the same information. They just might capture it different ways. But specific to, there are nuances specific to Verizon. Verizon doesn't capture the location information associated with a text message.
And other companies do.
Correct.
Do cellular providers maintain lists of where their towers are located?
They do. So each cellular provider has, by latitude and longitude location, every single tower that they have throughout the territory that they cover.
How do you use those types of records to determine where a phone was located?
So if you think about the specific geographical area, let's just talk about Idaho. So if you look at a cellular provider's tower records for Idaho, I can take those records and place them on a map for the significant area that we're looking at. So again, let's just say for the state of Idaho. With that, I can then take the call detail records and marry each line in a call detail record up with the location of the tower and sector that was used for that specific event. So if you think about it from the standpoint of every tower, if you imagine it was a mailbox on a map, I'm taking each line as a letter and delivering it to that specific mailbox on the map. So what that enables me to do is anytime there's an interaction on those call detail records, I can see at that date and time what tower and sector was utilized.
And how do you estimate the coverage area of a sector?
So that goes back to, again, talking about looking at the population density is usually a good estimate, because whenever you see an area like Boise, the coverage area of a tower and sector is usually going to go out to the next tower and sector because they want to provide overlapping coverage to their customers. Again, I'll use a few analogies when I explain this, but if you think about in your yard, if you have a sprinkler system and a sprinkler head's only going out a couple feet, and then there's nothing hitting the grass for another 10 feet to your next sprinkler, you're going to have dead grass, just like you're going to have dead areas in cell service. Because of that, engineers, in order to optimize their network, provide overlapping coverage. So each tower is going to have overlapping coverage with the tower next to it.
Is there a way to determine the actual coverage area of a sector versus how you just described?
Yes. So we can do what's called a drive test, which is I briefly mentioned as a part of our certification process. And what this is we take equipment that has sensors and antennas, and we can place it. It's a portable unit that we can place into a car. And then we, in essence, like the name says, drive an area. And as we're driving, it's taking hundreds of measurements a minute of the location of where the drive test equipment is and what the cellular signal that it sees at any given time. So if you go to a specific area and drive basically every road, every area that you can get to. Then what we can do is we can take all of that data, put it onto a map, and see what the true coverage of a tower and sector is versus what these estimates that I mentioned are.
And is drive testing used in the cellular industry?
Yes, drive testing would be the industry standard for determining the true coverage of a cellular footprint.
Did you conduct a drive test in this case?
I did.
What was the area that you conducted your drive test over?
So we conducted the drive test pretty much throughout Rexburg, all the way up to the area around St. Anthony and down just a little bit south of Rexburg.
When did you do that?
We did that in June of 2020.
Was there an event that led to you performing that drive test?
There was. I was contacted by law enforcement in June and was notified that they found the bodies of Tylee and JJ. And so immediately I worked out the logistics to get the equipment I needed up to the Rexburg area. And I believe I was over there within about 6 days after the bodies were found to conduct that drive test.
And you mentioned going all the way from St. Anthony down to south of Rexburg. Why would you do such an expansive drive test for an area that goes so far beyond Mr. Daybell's property?
Sure. So the investigation at that point was still ongoing. And so in order to basically ensure that any use of cellular phones that became of interest for specific dates, we would be able to see what the true footprint of towers were versus doing those estimates. So basically just because of the case itself and there was continuing investigation, that's why I chose to do a larger area.
What is the equipment you use to perform a drive test? What is it called?
It's called a Gladiator Autonomous Receiver, or GAR for short.
And can anyone go to Walmart and pick up a GAR?
No. So when I talked about doing a drive test, the GAR is kind of it's a multiple component device. What that means is it not only includes the sensors, antennas associated with getting the readings of the cellular signal, it also includes a computer. It also includes the software that the FBI utilizes to get those raw measurements and get them all the way to a map so that we can utilize it as a part of an investigation.
Okay, so it has, just to make sure everyone understands, a physical and a software component.
Yes, the company provides a physical and a software component.
And you mentioned scanners in that equipment. Are the scanners within the GAR restricted to law enforcement?
No, they are not.
The GAR unit itself, is that restricted to law enforcement?
Yes. So the company that sells the GAR Gladiator, at least the last time I checked, they only sold to law enforcement.
And you testified that you conducted this test in June of 2019?
In June of 2020.
June of 2020, I apologize. Thank you. Moving on, are you able to determine where a phone, by using cellular records, are you able to determine where a phone is located 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by identifying the tower and sector it uses?
No. So that's where I talked a little bit about before. We need a line on a call detail record at a specific date and time. And that's what allows me to give an estimate, is if I have a specific date and time where the phone interacted with the network and then the tower and sector that was used. So again, with the analogies, but if you think about it where you have a neighbor and you know what they drive. So if you look out the window at 9:01 in the morning and you see their car in the driveway, and then you go about your business and you go back 30 minutes later and the car is still in the driveway, you can't say what that car was doing for that time whenever you weren't looking out the window. The records are the same way. So whenever I have a record, I can make an estimate based on the tower and sector that was used. But if there's no use for a period of time, I can't make an estimate during that period of no use.
And again, does the cell phone always select the geographically closest tower?
No, it's going to select the strongest signal that it sees.
But so a phone, even if it doesn't select the closest tower, it will select a tower within the coverage area. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And that's why we conduct a drive test, is because a phone, in order to utilize a tower and sector, has to be able to see that tower and sector at the location where it is.
So regardless of the phone selecting the closest or slightly more distant tower, the phone's approximate area can still be estimated, correct?
Yes.
We've been talking about cell records. Are you familiar with Google location records?
I am.
Can you describe what they are?
So
Well,
Google provides a
let's, you
service
know,
that
let's
includes
just
location history.
chop,
And so if
chop.
a user opts into location
The
history,
relevant
then
questions,
Google
please.
records locations where a device
I'm
that
gonna
is
fast
opted
forward
in
them. And
has
this
been
is
located
audio
historically.
only. That's why we can't
How does
see the
Google identify
witness,
the location of a
even
device?
though the cameras here
A few different ways.
are really not
One way
focusing
is
on
by the GPS
anybody.
within the phone.
Do you regularly use cellular telephone technology and
Do you
Google
know what
location technology?
Google is? Yes.
Yes, on a daily
To
basis.
use a cell phone, yes.
Have you ever provided instruction in the field of historical cell site
ever
analysis?
showed
I have.
anybody
I've
how to
conducted
use a cell
numerous
phone?
CAS basic courses
Yes.
throughout the United States, and then I've done presentations throughout the United States and Mexico. And
Okay. Keep going. Oh, that's it? That was it? You just want to know his experience?
There are two different sources
Oh,
of
here we
information, and I get this is just an example, but if you can point out kind of those different sources of information and the numbers associated with those.
yeah, so
Okay.
specific to this case, Google location history included locations that were derived from GPS, Wi-Fi, and cellular. That column there is where we can determine how that
Laying the
specific location was
foundation.
derived.
We got to listen to it because
And the number next
laying
to
the
it, what is that
foundation.
number?
To the left or to the right?
To the left.
To the left, that's the margin of
To the
error
left,
associated with
to
that
the
specific
left.
location in meters.
Everything you want.
what are we seeing on slide 11?
So whenever you get into my report, those lines that are from a call detail record, I represent with basically a call information box so that way you can see the specific location that's mapped, what that record indicated for date, time, direction of the call, type of call, and then the azimuth or direction from that tower that interaction occurred, as well as any associated number for if it's a call
Sounds
or a
great, but
text
I don't
message.
see anything. Okay, let's
The
see.
locations of significance mentioned
Okay,
down in
now I see
Springville,
a
Utah.
map.
So the EG is the Evergreen Cemetery and the HI is the Holiday Inn Express.
Okay. Relevance to the
So,
case.
Agent, were you asked to look at a couple of or some specific dates as part of your investigation?
I was.
Yes, there we go.
We just saw a slide that said September 9th. Was your involvement in this investigation concurrent with other investigators working on this case?
It was.
Sure.
And what was significant about the date September 9th to you?
So based on conversations that I'd had with investigators, they determined that September 8th was likely the last time that Tylee Ryan was photographed alive.
Okay, thank you. So slide 20, if you can walk the jury through what we're seeing here and where it's at.
Yeah, so I'll be a little bit more specific in this one because the majority of my slides are going to follow this same format. So at the top, you're seeing what it is. This is based on Google location history, the account that is associated with that Google location, and all the Google location history in this report is going to be for homerjmaximus@gmail.com. And then you're seeing basically the bookends of what this slide represents. And by that, I mean, we're looking at September 9th for any locations between 12 a.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. Also, with all of my analysis of the Google location history, I looked at Google locations that were 100 meters or less in margin of error. So then we see,
Agent, if I can stop you there, why did you pick 100 meters or less?
just to ensure that whenever you look at Google location, you can see margin of errors that can be extremely wide in the thousands of meters. So we did that to basically look at the more precise locations from the reporting.
So is it fair to say you did that in an effort to be more accurate?
The locations that are larger margin of error are accurate, but it helps us to basically look at a specific device and where it's located. When you start getting extremely large margins of error, I wouldn't be able to differentiate whether a device was in this slide at reporting from Alex Cox's residence or Lori Vallow's residence. So 100 meters was basically just the line that I set as far as what precision we were looking at.
And when we speak about the Homer J. Maximus at Gmail account, that has been brought up before, but can you remind the jury who that account is associated with?
With Alex Cox.
All right. So you've taken us through the heading. Can you walk us through the rest of the slide?
Yeah, so you'll see two different locations that both are reported via GPS. And so on the top left, if you can see the pointer, we're looking at 242 and 2 seconds, 242 and 11 seconds, and 337 and 22 seconds. Google location consistent with being just west of Lori Vallow's apartment. And then there's movement between 337 and 437, where at 437, it's now reporting consistent with being at Alex Cox's apartment.
And so just to verify the time here, we're talking about 2:42 a.m. September 9th.
Correct.
And just to make sure we're interpreting the data correctly, what this shows is that Alex Cox is...
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There seems to be some leading.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may I briefly argue?
Just ask another non-leading question, please, Mr. Wood.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
saying, does this show that Alex
So
was
the
with
yellow
Tylee?
dots are associated with locations of... what are those associated with?
These are the dots.
So those are associated with a Google location of Alex Cox's device.
Which one?
And just to briefly summarize, on what times are Alex Cox's device located near Lori Vallow's residence?
At 2:42 in the morning, and then at 3:37 in the morning.
And then after that, where does
I'm
his
gonna try to
device
see if
go?
I can find this.
So there are no records that I found of 100 meters or less between 3:37 and 4:37. At 4:37, the Google location is consistent with being at Alex Cox's residence.
Agent, what do we see on slide 21?
So again, I'll go through this a little bit more in detail just because it's the first time you're seeing a tower and sector being mapped. So at the top, it's tower interactions, cellular tower interactions. And then below that, I'm going to indicate which phone numbers are associated with what I mapped. And then again, with the bookend of what times I was looking at. So this specifically is looking at September 9th from 7:20 in the morning until 8:04 in the morning. The tower at the top is associated with the 0143 phone, which was associated with Chad Daybell. That's utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence. And then there are multiple text messages and then a call at 8:03. And then, as I mentioned before, Verizon does not record the location information for text messaging. So because of that, we can see that the text messages are being exchanged with the Lori Vallow 4652 phone, but we don't see the tower and sector that her phone utilized in those text messages. We do, however, see on the phone call that occurs at 8:03 from the Daybell 4652 phone from the Daybell 0143 phone to the Lori Vallow 4652 phone. We see that the Lori Vallow phone is utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to her residence.
I mean, what was the date and time frame for these conversations?
Yeah, so the text messages were 7:20 in the morning, 7:42, 7:53, 8 o'clock, and then 8:03. And then the phone call is from the Daybell 0143 to the Vallow 4652 phone at 8:03.
Agent, in your review of phone records, how often would Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell communicate with each other?
Pretty regularly.
So slide 22, wow, what are we seeing there?
Okay, so this is a different phone associated with Chad Daybell, ending 9374. This is on the Verizon network, and it's utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Daybell residents to make an outbound call to a phone associated with Alex Cox, ending in 9120. Alex Cox's phone at that time was utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to his residents.
That was September 9th at 8:11 a.m.
Correct.
Can you tell how long of a phone call that was?
Yes. So in the box, you'll see after the outgoing call, you'll see 180, then you'll see voice, and then you'll see 280. That 180 represents the duration of the call, and then the 280 represents the azimuth or direction from the tower that that antenna set was facing.
So it was a 180-second call.
Correct.
And what do we see on slide 23?
So this is the Daybell 0143 phone utilizing 3 different towers, all of which provide coverage to his residents between 8:15 in the morning and 9:06 in the morning.
And who are those communications with? Can you tell?
Yeah, so one at 8:58 is an outbound text to the Lori Vallow 4652 phone. And then at
Verizon,
8:15
which
and
is not
8:39,
very
there's an outbound
reliable,
and an inbound
but
text, both
I
associated with an
guess
exchange
as
with Lori
far as
Vallow's
the maps
4652
go,
phone.
we can
And then the
go
other
with
incoming
it.
SMS at 9:05 is a number that I don't
And
recognize.
how often did Chad and Lori talk? I mean, every minute, because they were
Agent, what are we
obsessed with
seeing on
each
slide
other
24?
and
This is showing from the previous slide the 3 towers that were
manipulating each other
utilized
in
and the
different
true coverage
ways.
area obtained via the drive test.
He
And
would
so what you can
use
see is
the
there's
religion
coverage represented by
aspect to
red on the top
manipulate
right, the
her.
next one over to
All
the
the
left is in
angels
green,
have
and the bottom
told
left is in
me
yellow.
they don't
But
want
the
us to
orange color
fight, and
represents
she
a
would
overlapping coverage
use
area.
the
So usually that's significant as a
sexual
part of my analysis because
side.
if a phone
You
utilizes
know,
multiple
I can't wait
towers
to
in
see
close
you and
proximity in
show you a
time, I can estimate
surprise
that
and
that
stuff
phone
like
needs to
that.
be
They
or
were
has to be
always
within that overlapping
manipulating
coverage
each
area,
other.
depending on how far apart in time they were, or at least close to that overlapping coverage area.
So if we go back a slide,
What's the point?
where I'm pointing my
What is the
mouse, are those
question?
different towers that are being utilized by Chad Daybell's phone?
Yes. So if you're looking starting on the right at 8:39 in the morning, it utilizes the tower in
Okay.
St. Anthony, 8:58, the tower in Parker, and then 9:05, the tower to the far southwest. So within that 26-minute window, you're looking at the phone would need to be near those overlapping coverage areas. Otherwise, you would have to, in essence, be in one coverage area and move to another one in order to get service from that particular tower and sector.
And so again, slide 24 is a map of that coverage area.
Correct.
And what is slide 25?
That's just zoomed in, showing that all 3 of those towers provide
All we
coverage to
see
the
is a
Daybell
little
residents.
red dot inside of a big yellow thing.
Agent, what do we see in slide 26?
So here we're seeing
Why?
Google location history associated with one of Alex Cox's devices, indicating that at 8:49 in the morning, it's consistent with
Okay.
being down in the area of his apartment, and by 9:15, it's consistent with being just south of Chad Daybell's property.
Can you point those locations out to the jury? Patricia?
Okay, that's
And the times
good.
associated with those locations.
So that's the Google location at 8:49 and 19 on the bottom left of the screen, and then at the top is at 9:15.
And what are the I should have asked earlier, what are the margins of error associated with those hits?
8 meters at the bottom, and then 3 meters at the top, both reporting via GPS.
And so the measurement at 9:15 is just south of Mr. Daybell's residence.
That's correct.
Agent, what do we see on page 27?
So here you're seeing Google location history associated with a device reporting from Alex Cox's Gmail account. And you're seeing multiple different locations that were mapped during that time window. So the first one that we see is at 9:21 and 36 seconds.
And Agent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you can use the pointer
Yeah, for
and
sure.
show the jury which box and
That would be
you're pointing
great.
to,
Thank you.
as you go through these.
Yep. So at 9:21 and 36 seconds, we see a Google location history reported or data line that shows a margin of error of 6 meters, very
Where?
close in proximity to the area where Tylee was found. And then we see at 9:22 and 50 seconds, a location over here that is a 3-meter margin of error. And then we see 2 additional at 10:39 and 10:57. The 10:39 has a 43-meter margin of error, which is that larger yellow circle. And then 10:57, we have a 5-meter margin of error, again, in the area where Tylee's.
Did
body was found.
anybody see the pointer at any point? I didn't.
Agent,
I
did you
saw it
personally go to
here.
this property?
I did.
Was there anything significant to you on the northwest corner where there's the hit at 9:22? Anything significant to you in that area?
There's a gate that allows you to access the property via vehicle right there. That's actually how we entered the property with the drive test equipment.
And can you remind the jury what BP stands for?
The burn pit.
And the TY, is that the location of Tylee's body?
Yes.
And this was September 9th?
Correct.
Take a quick break here, Mr. Wood.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go ahead and just take our morning recess here and take about 20, 25 minutes on the recess, and then we'll come back on.
All rise. See ya. Okay, so let's just recap real quick. This is the first witness. His name is Special Agent Nick Balance. He's an FBI cell phone analyst. And he came to testify to the locations of the devices based on GPS, Google location, Gmail accounts, cellular data. They are pinpointing where Alex's cell phone was, Chad's phone was. And they also mentioned the last time that Tylee was photographed alive. So we'll see what else he's going to bring. Let's just fast forward real quick from this break.
Provide coverage to the
Okay, here we go. We're waiting for the jury.
Thank you. Please be seated.
And the testimony is only audio. That's why we don't see anybody here on this little box.
All right, we just completed the mid-morning recess. We're still on the record.
Oh, you guys can't see the
KCR
little
2221
box.
1623 State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell, continuing with direct examination
This
of
little
Agent Balance.
box.
Mr. Wood, if you'd like to continue on direct, you may.
Let's go.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I continue to publish?
You may.
Sure. Go ahead.
Agent, before the break, we had just left this slide, so just for purposes of continuity, you just very briefly re-summarize the slide so we can move to the next.
Sure. This was looking at Google location history associated with a device for Alex Cox and locations in and around the Chad Daybell property between 9:21 and 10:57 in the morning.
What do we see on slide 28?
So this is looking at a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell property and the Chad Daybell 0143 phone, and it's used between 10:35 in the morning and 12:20 that afternoon. And in the box, you can see there's multiple text messages and one call, again, beginning at 10:35 and going through 12:20.
And in the legend, it just has the number for Chad Daybell. Are you familiar with the numbers that he is communicating with?
I am. So the number ending 4652 would be associated with Lori Vallow.
Is it fair to say that much of these communications on this slide are taking place during the same time frame as this slide?
It goes a little bit beyond that, but
Okay.
yes.
And what do we see on slide 29?
So that's looking at the dominant and coverage area of the tower that was used from the previous slide, indicating that that tower does provide coverage to the Chad Daybell property.
In slide 30?
And this is just a zoomed in view of the previous slide, again, indicating that that tower provides coverage to the Daybell property.
And what do we see in slide 31?
So this is Google location history, again, associated with the account for Alex Cox's device, starting at 11:42 in the morning. There are two locations reported to Google up here. One is at 11:45, 28-meter margin of error, and then one just preceded that at 11:42 with a 4-meter margin of error just north of Chad Daybell's property. And then at 11:46 and 11:47, there's two additional Google locations reported consistent with southbound travel away from Chad Daybell's property.
And again, that's September 9th.
Correct.
And what do we see on slide 32?
So this is looking at calls that were made. I'll start at the top from the Chad Daybell 0143 phone, an outbound call of 183 seconds made to the Lori Vallow 4652 phone. And again, that was at 11:45 in the morning, utilizing a tower that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence. And then also the number ending 9120 associated with Alex Cox, making an outbound call to the 4652 Lori Vallow phone, utilizing a Verizon tower that also provides coverage to the area around the Daybell property. And then the location of the Lori Vallow 4652 phone, whenever it received those calls, consistent with being down in the area of Rexburg.
All right, so just to be clear, that top box in blue, that's a phone call from a phone associated with Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow.
That's correct.
And that middle box, the first red one, that's an outgoing call from a phone associated with Alex Cox to a phone associated with Lori Vallow.
Yes, that's correct.
And again, just for clarity, these symbols here, if you can just remind the jury, since we came in off that break, what those describe.
For sure. Those represent the specific sectors on that tower that were used. So you can see those shapes or wedges. They represent approximately 120 degrees of that piece of pie that I mentioned earlier from the circle.
What do we see on slide 33?
So that's specific to the Verizon tower that was utilized by the 9120 phone associated with Alex Cox, and what that coverage area looks like. That does include Chad Daybell's property in the area to the south.
And that's related to the phone call he made on the previous slide?
Correct. That's the tower that was used to make the phone call from the previous slide.
And slide 34.
And again, this is just a zoomed in view of that coverage map.
What do we see on slide 35?
These are two interactions with the network, both of them text messages. At 12:32 and 37 seconds, the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell receives a text message from the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow, and it utilizes a tower that does provide coverage to the Daybell residence. And then approximately 1 minute later, there's an outbound text from the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell to the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. That tower, which we'll see in following slides, does also provide coverage to the Daybell residence. I would speak more to that on one of the following slides. And that's where you can see the coverage map associated with that tower down in Rexburg, which does provide coverage to the north-south road that goes up towards Chad Daybell's property, but it does include the Chad Daybell property.
And what is significant on slide 37?
So this is a call a few minutes later, or an inbound text message a few minutes later received by the 0143 Daybell phone from the 4652 Lori Vallow phone. This tower does not provide coverage to the Daybell residence and would be consistent with that 0143 phone traveling away from the residence.
And is that moving in a southern direction from the home?
Yes, sir, south towards Rexburg.
And what do we see on slide 38?
This is showing the coverage of that tower from the previous slide and showing basically that it provides coverage to a little ways north of Rexburg, but it is zoomed to the viewpoint that shows the coverage, which does not include Chad Daybell's residence.
And so just clarify, this is related to the last two slides then?
No,
Or-
that is a separate tower. So
Okay.
if you go back, go back one more and one more. Sorry, keep going. So that tower that you see to the south, the coverage map for that is the one that does include coverage to Chad Daybell's property. The one at 1239, I believe it was, that's a separate tower than the one depicted earlier, and that one does not include coverage to Chad Daybell's property.
What do we see on slide 39?
So this is looking at on September the 9th, between 1243 and 1249, tower usage by the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell, the 9120 phone associated with Alex. Yes, ma'am. Associated with the 0143 phone. Tower usage associated with the 9120 phone.
Okay, let me pause here real quick. Okay, just so what I'm understanding so far from his testimony, I was looking at some evidence here. And okay, so Tylee Ryan, she was last photographed on September 8th, 2019. Okay, that was a photograph that they had. And all the friends, Lori's friends, when asked where Tylee was, Lori told them that she was living and attending BYU, Idaho. Okay. But then somebody at the school said they never received any applications for Tylee and she was not living there. The investigators, including the one that is testifying right now, they concluded that September 9th, the following day to the picture, right? She was photographed on the 8th, and then the following day could have been the last time she was alive because the photograph was taken on the 8th. Then on the 9th, there was some suspicious activities with the phone. So that's what he's talking about. So we have Alex Cox, who unfortunately also died, by the way, Lori Vallow's brother. Okay. In this whole story, Alex is known for doing whatever Lori wanted him to do and just, treating her as like a goddess and being even a little weird for her brother. So Alex, his phone was close to Lori's apartment. She had an apartment at Rexburg. So Alex's phone pings in the tower at 2:42 a.m. and 3:47 a.m. So 2:42, 3:47, 1 hour in the middle of the night, Alex's phone is around Lori's house. And then he's back at his apartment 4:37. So 2:40 to 3:40, 3:40 to 4:40. So he was out for 2 hours, and in one of those hours, he was around Lori's apartment. The next day, Alex's phone was just south of Chad Daybell's house, okay? This location, Chad Daybell's house, is where the bodies were found months later, the bodies of JJ and Tylee. Now, so 9:15, Alex's phone is at Chad's house. Between 9:15 and almost 11, that's where Alex's phone was. That's where the location shows him to be. Now, at 11:45, so 9:15 to 10:57, right? 9:15 to 11, Alex's phone is there. Now at 11:45, Alex's phone moves away from Chad's house. And at the same time, Chad calls Lori. Okay. So it's like Alex shows up in the morning. He spends some hours with Chad, and then as soon as Alex leaves, Chad calls Lori, and that was the day after the kid, Tylee in this case, was last seen alive. So that's what they're trying to show here, like as far as what is the story the cell phones are telling us. So let's see where we're picking up here. I think they're talking about noon.
which is associated with Alex Cox. And then tower usage of the 4652 phone, which is associated with Lori Vallow.
And what do we see on slide 40?
So this is looking at the coverage maps of the different towers that were utilized in the previous slide.
And so is it fair to say that the phones we were looking at in the previous slide, the 9120, the 0143, are within the Rexburg area at that time?
Correct. You'll see from the drive test data that the Verizon tower that is utilized by the phones associated with Alex Cox and Lori Vallow actually do extend up pretty far north and could potentially include the Daybell property. But the tower use of the 0143 phone used by Chad Daybell is depicted in orange, which does not include Chad Daybell residence and provides coverage to the Rexburg area.
Can you point that out to the jury, that area?
For sure. The area that I'm circling with the pointer in
Thank you.
orange.
What do we see on slide 41?
So this is zoomed in, where it shows the coverage area of the Verizon tower utilized by phones associated with Alex Cox and Lori Vallow, as well as coverage in orange associated with the 0143 Chad Daybell phone. And the overlapping coverage area does include Alex Cox and Lori Vallow's residence. You also see Google location history at 1243 and 1246, reporting from a device associated with Alex Cox's Google account, consistent with being at Alex Cox's residence.
That's still September 9th.
Correct.
Agent Balance, were you asked to look at cellular and Google data related to on or around September 23?
I was.
I'm sorry, of 2019.
I was. Yes, sir.
And why was that?
In conversation with investigators, it was determined that the last photograph of JJ Vallow alive was on September 22nd.
So what do we see on slide 43?
So here we're looking at September 23rd between 3:59 in the morning and 8:35 in the morning. Multiple outbound text messages and one inbound text message. And these exchanges are all between the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell and the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. The tower and sector that was used by the 0143 phone provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence.
And I think you said it, but what is the time of that first message?
That's at 3:59 in the morning, and that is an outbound from the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell to a phone associated with Lori Vallow.
And what do we see on slide 44?
That's Google location information associated with an account attributed to Alex Cox on September the 23rd, between 9:01 in the morning and 9:41, consistent with being at Alex Cox's apartment.
So during that approximately 40 minutes, is it fair to say that that device is relatively non-moving?
Correct. All of those are repeated locations with the same margin of error.
So last photo of
What do we
JJ
see on slide
now
45?
taken on September
So
22nd.
this is mapping out a phone call that was made from the 9374 phone associated with Chad Daybell, utilizing a Verizon tower that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence. And the call was made to the phone number ending 9120 associated with Alex Cox.
What time is that phone call made?
That's at 9:25 in the morning.
How long are you able to tell from the cell data you received, or the call data, how long that phone call was?
Yes. So you can see after the type, the 38, that represents a phone call of 38 seconds.
And this is September 23rd.
Yes, that's correct.
What do we see on slide 46?
That's just showing the tower and sector that was used in the previous slide, what the coverage looks like for that Verizon tower, and that it includes the Chad Daybell residence.
And 47?
It's just a zoomed in version of the previous slide, again, to show the coverage. It includes the Chad Daybell residence.
What do we see on slide 48?
So this is showing activity on the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell, as well as activity on the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. Specific to the 0143 phone, there's 3 different towers that are utilized, all of which provide coverage to the Daybell residence. And then there's the tower that is utilized by the phone associated with Lori Vallow is utilizing a tower in Rexburg.
And all those communications take place between what time?
9:27 and 9:37.
On September 23rd.
Yes, sir. Correct.
What do we see on slide 49?
So here we see starting at 9:45 and continuing through 9:49, Google location history associated with Alex Cox's Google account, showing the device that was reporting to that account consistent with movement away from his apartment north on Highway 20.
And is that traveling towards Chad Daybell's property? Are you aware?
It is.
What do we see on slide 50?
So this is showing Google location information associated with Alex Cox's account with Google, showing that his device was reporting in and around Chad Daybell's property between 9:55 in the morning and 10:12. And then specifically on the top right, there are 2 locations reported via GPS. One of them is at 9:56 with a 4-meter margin of error. The other one is at 10:02 with a 3-meter margin of error, which are close in proximity to where JJ's body was
So
found.
Alex was at Chad's house for like less than 20 minutes from 9:55
What do
to
we see on slide 51?
10:12.
Those are the same 2 locations that I just spoke about on the previous slide. They just include the yellow margin of error to show the accuracy.
Oh,
associated
10:12,
with
and
those 2
then
locations.
10:13 he calls Lori.
What was significant on slide 52?
So this is looking at the usage of the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell, the 2 different towers that were utilized between 9:30 in the morning and 10:27 in the morning on September the 23rd. So you see on the right, there's multiple outbound calls and text messages, as well as 1 inbound text message. All of those are exchanged between that phone and the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. And then you see the tower usage down here. 2 of those, 1 an outbound call and then 1 an incoming SMS or text message, are associated with the 4652 phone attributed to Lori Vallow. So the significance that I talked about earlier, as far as looking at whenever 2 different towers are utilized, that phone would need to either be, depending on the time, within the overlapping coverage area or in close proximity to that overlapping coverage area. And then this is just showing the overlapping coverage area in orange that includes Chad Daybell's residence.
What is slide 54?
And that's just a zoomed in version of the previous slide.
And what do we see on slide 55?
This is showing Google location information on September the 23rd, between 10:12 in the morning and 10:20, consistent with a device associated with Alex Cox reporting Google location information showing at 10:12 in the morning, consistent with being nearby the Daybell property, and then at 10:20 being back down, consistent with being in Rexburg.
On September 23rd.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And what do we see on slide 56?
So this is showing on September the 23rd between 10:13 and 10:17 in the morning, use of the 0143 phone associated with Chad Daybell, and 3 outbound text messages, all to the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. Those are at 10:16, all at 10:16. And then an outbound call from the 9120 phone associated with Alex Cox at 10:13, calling the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow. And then at the bottom, the location of Lori Vallow's phone whenever it received that incoming call, because again, it's on Verizon, so the text messages don't
It
record
is
the
really
tower
hard for us to see the map, but we get it.
Agent, did you look at any
I
other
think we're
times where the
understanding
Homer J. Maximus account
how
showed
the
up at or near
locations of the
Mr. Daybell's
phones
residence?
and
I
the
did.
And did you have any parameters
timestamps
that you put on that search?
were
Yeah, so the same parameter that I mentioned
so
earlier, where I was
close
looking
to
at
the
any location that had a
location
margin of
of
error
where
of
the
100 meters or
bodies
less,
were,
or the Google location.
and kind of
And did you
like
include those at
Alex
the end
is
of this report?
telling Chad, hey, I'm doing this, or spending time with Chad at his house, then everybody
Agent,
calls
is this
Lori right
in relation to what we were
after,
talking about other times when the Homer J. Maximus account
kind
or
of
a device
like to let
associated
her
with it shows
know,
up
listen,
with
we
pattern
just
Chad Daybell's
did
property? Is
this.
this a summary of that?
It is. It just does not include the 2 dates that we just went over. It includes other dates in addition to those.
So what do we see on slide 105?
So this is Google location reporting associated with Alex Cox's Gmail account
What do we
for device
see?
reporting
We don't
on
really
August 7th
see
between
anything.
109
We
and
see
120.
like a
The locations
dot.
as indicated on the map, consistent with being at the Chad Daybell property.
And what do we see on slide 106?
The same reporting that I just mentioned associated with the same account, just on August 24th between 7:24 and 7:32 p.m.
And slide 107?
Location information associated with the same account that I just mentioned on September the 6th between 12:42 and 12:54 p.m.
Okay.
And slide 108?
The same account associated with Alex Cox, indicating a device reporting on September 25th between 10:05 in the morning and 10:23 in the morning.
I
in the
guess
vicinity
they're
of Chad
just
Daybell's residence.
entering this information. They're using this witness to enter
Agent,
the
we have
foundation, but I don't even
gone over a lot of
know
data
what those
in
dates
terms of
have
cell
to do
coverage
with
and
anything.
GPS, Wi-Fi hits. I just want to go back over a few slides for purposes of establishing time.
All right,
With
let's
Alex
fast
Cox,
forward a
consistent
little
with
bit.
traveling north away from Alex Cox. There was an action that took place on it.
Now, I read your report, and
Oh, this is cross.
do you recall the approximate time that the report stemmed from the 911 call?
I
on Tammy
always
Daybell?
like cross.
I don't.
Would it be possible that it was about 9:30 to 10 o'clock? Does that refresh your recollection?
I know it was in the evening hours, but specific time I don't.
Now, based on your analysis about Alex Cox's phone, and I just want you to touch on the your evaluation of that October 9th time. Can you tell me what Alex Cox's phone and where it was binging on October 9th between approximately 5:30 and 10:30 at night?
Did you say binging?
Well, where it was locating, where it was showing location data.
Bing.
I need to look at my report to
Bing.
answer that question. I don't.
I don't know. I don't have it here. So what happened? They're on 2-speed and nobody's talking.
Judge, can I publish this?
Go ahead,
Not sure.
Prior.
Are we on the exhibit one?
We're on exhibit 156, page 80.
Go ahead. Exhibit yourself as much as you can, because we got nothing here. We got like a blank.
Are you able to see that,
screen.
Agent?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Homer J. Maximus, and I'm looking at October 9th. Why don't you read that time for me?
Yeah, so this is October the 9th between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m., showing Google location history associated with Alex Cox's device.
Okay, and that's on October 9th, is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
And that was the date that allegedly there was some sort of an incident on Tammy Daybell's property between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, is that correct?
My understanding was the evening hours, but I think that would encompass it.
So
Mr.
according to
Pryor,
this,
I need to have you talking to the microphone to keep our record for FTR.
I'm sorry, Judge, and according to your data, it appears that the phone associated with Alex Cox from the Homer J. Maximus account puts Alex Cox where between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m.?
So it puts the device at Alex Cox's residence.
Your Honor, may I ask and I apologize to interrupt, may I ask for just a brief sidebar?
Yes.
Why you want a sidebar? Why you want a sidebar? He was just asking, so you put Alex at this location, right? He's like, well, no, I put the phone at that location. Sidebar, please. Well, when they come back, we'll see what the sidebar was all about. Where did they do these sidebars? They go behind? They go to the judge's little house in the back? Or do they go where the judge lives here in this little door and he just comes out for trials? I'm tired, guys. What can I say? Where do they go for the sidebar? Let me just go a little bit further.
Officer, and the display's not up anymore, I guess. We're looking at 5/16 on October 9th, right?
Yes, sir.
What happened? Now I want to know. Is John Pryor going to come back with an attitude? Is he going to make a little comment on the sidebar or no? Or we're just going to move on? Either I fast forward and it's too long and we have to go back, or when I go back way too much. So let me just wait. Look at this face of a banana. Oh, I'll show you some pictures of Chad later. Let's go. Oh, Your Honor. Okay.
All right, you can continue with cross, Mr. Pryor.
So again, officer, and the display's not up anymore, I guess. We're looking at 5:16 p.m. to 11.
Let's keep that up. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Pryor. We'll make sure we got the, okay.
So Alex
All right,
Cox's
so Pryor
phone. And tell me,
wins.
what is the proper term? It's showing a location data on October 9th between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m. Is that what that reads?
Yes, correct.
And that's on October 9th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, we can take that down, Judge.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
And Judge, one more time on page 104.
You want to publish that page?
Yes.
All right, Madam Clerk, we'll publish the exhibit again, please.
So other than the references
what do we
to
see here? What do we see
September
here?
9th and September 23rd, correct? There were 5 other times that you put Alex Cox at or near the Chad Daybell property. Is that correct?
So there were 5 other occasions where a device associated with Alex Cox reported.
Alex Cox's device.
Correct.
And those would have been August 7th.
Correct.
And that was for about 11 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
And then August 24th for 8 minutes.
Yes, sir.
September 6th, 3 days before the 9th, and he was there for about 10 minutes, right?
9 minutes, sir.
9 minutes, I'm sorry. My math is probably not as good as yours. September 25th,
It's not math.
2 days after the
fact.
23rd, he was there for 18 minutes, right?
Yeah, and I'll back up. Your math is actually better than mine because that would have been
Oh,
11
God.
minutes.
They're both wrong.
No,
And
you're
then
better. No,
October
you're
15th, so,
better. No, you hang
when I
up.
read your report, your contact was limited to 100 meters. Is that correct?
Yeah, my analysis was based on margins of error that were less, 100 meters or less,
300 feet.
approximately.
So that does not include if Alex Cox drove by a number of times, right?
It could, because if that device had that 100 meters or less and it went by on the street beside the residence, it would have been included in there.
And but if he was more than 100 meters away, it doesn't include these figures aren't included in that. Is that correct?
So if the device was more than 100 meters in error, then it wouldn't include it.
Right.
So as long as that 100 meters, that circle that I showed earlier with yellow, as long as it touched the Daybell property, that's when it was included.
Okay, Judge, we can take this one down. Now, I want to go back to just to clarify a couple of things in terms of explanations. Go ahead, I'll wait for you.
Sure, you're good.
Oh, do you need some water?
You're good.
Okay. What's the difference between a tower and a cell site?
So if you get into the specifics, the cell site in the industry is more or less used for the tower and sector, whereas the tower would just include the tower itself.
Okay. So your presentation deals with tower coverage. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the tower is basically where the antenna is on the top of whatever the structure is. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. A cell site is how they actually create the coverage. Is that fair?
So if you're looking at the cell site, the specific antenna that are on top of the tower and the direction that they face, that's usually termed to be the cell site of what it provides coverage for.
So we're not really talking about tower coverage. We're talking about cell site coverage, aren't we?
The tower coverage would include all the sectors, whereas the cell site would be specific to a sector.
Okay. And the importance of how an antenna is located plays into how these figures are calculated. Would that be fair?
Correct.
So for instance, if an antenna is a little pointed down or pointed up, that will manipulate and have an impact on what the readings that you're getting. Do you agree with that?
It would impact the coverage based on which direction antennas are facing.
And when we're talking about coverage, we're talking about with what you're talking about with coverage, we're talking about where an area of a cell phone company is providing service. Would that be fair?
Correct.
You never use these coverage towers to actually locate where a phone is. Isn't that true?
No, I definitely would use coverage maps to locate where a phone is in
Okay.
the past.
So when did you do the drive test? On what day?
I believe it was June, the week of June 15th, and it was across multiple days of 2020.
Okay. So in 2019, particularly in September, that was a significant amount of time later, correct?
It's about 9 months after.
Right. And we have no assurance that the antennas or the coverage or the engineers made any adjustments or changes, do we?
We do. So I looked at the tower lists that were provided from
We
AT&T
know,
and
we
Verizon
do.
for September of 2019, and I compared those with the tower lists from June of 2020, and I didn't see anything in any of the towers used in this report that would significantly impact what the coverage would have been or changed.
Significantly impact?
Correct.
So there were changes?
There were no changes in direction of which way sectors were pointed. There was changes in what's called the beam width, and they were off by about 5 degrees, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With drive testing, you still can't provide an exact location of where a device is, can you?
Correct. Drive testing is basically going to show you a coverage area of where a phone could be.
Where a phone could be, right?
Correct.
It doesn't show where the phone is, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned this a couple of times with the prosecuting attorney. You mentioned the term gladiator forensics.
Yes, sir.
Now, the way I understand gladiator forensics is that's a tool used by the FBI.
They're a company, and they provide a tool that's used by the FBI.
But that company will not provide their tools to anybody but the FBI. Is that fair?
No, my understanding is they will only provide or sell their equipment to law enforcement. I don't think it's specific to the FBI.
To the government.
Correct.
So an independent person can't get hold of this information from gladiator forensics and do their own analysis of what your data is showing. Is that right?
No, the information, most definitely. That's whenever it records the
What,
information of the drive
Savannah?
test, we have a raw data
Why?
file that shows all the different measurements and the latitude, longitude of the location of where the device took those measurements.
But you're providing the data, but the actual tool and the program itself is not available to anybody unless you're within the government. Isn't that true?
I believe their specific company only sells to law enforcement.
So you folks have the program. You folks have the way to input the data into your program that's only the government has access to. Is that right?
So we have a tool that allows access to it, but Gladiator doesn't make the only tool that would provide that same information.
Okay. But the tool that the FBI is using is not available to the public at large. Is that right?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, has anybody ever done any independent testing outside government to prove that this tool that you're using is working properly?
Yeah, so we actually send that device off to the company that manufactures the sensors, Roden Swartz, and they calibrate that system.
But then again, that's not available to the average citizen out there, correct?
It is. The sensors by Roden Swartz are sold to the general public.
But the tools by Gladiator Forensics are not.
So when you say tools, basically like the components of the device, yes, they are. But as packaged by Gladiator, that is not available to the public.
Okay. So once again, if someone wants to verify that the tools that you folks are being sold by Gladiator Forensics were working properly or that there's no issues with those, there's no way to do that, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. You could go buy the sensors associated with reading the different cellular frequencies in the area, and you could do your own drive test.
Well, why don't you just get Gladiator Forensics to send us the tools in the program and we could verify it that way? Wouldn't that be the simpler way to do it?
I don't work for the company,
Argumentative.
sir, so I don't know.
I said objection argumentative.
Well, can we quickly, Mr. Pryor and Mr. Balance, please don't talk at the same time as each other.
Now, the most accurate location data would actually come from the device itself. Would that be fair?
Can you clarify what you
If
mean?
you were looking at location data for a device, the best way to determine the location data is to actually have the device itself, right?
I would say it could aid, but I wouldn't necessarily say it would be the best because it depends on the settings of the actual device.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to Exhibit 51, if we could. And Judge, if we could put that up there.
Yes, we'll ask the clerk to do that, please.
Now, with a pointer, you have some marks there and it's showing a pond. Is that right?
It's showing,
A irrigation pond.
yes, sir, I believe that's what it was.
Okay. And do you have an idea approximately, since you've been out there, how much property we're talking about here?
So if you are able to zoom out, it does have a scale on the bottom right, and that'll help.
And that I can't do.
Okay.
So what I'm looking at on the map, there's a road that runs, I believe, north and south. Is that right?
Talking about this here, sir?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
And then initially you would put on the road running north and south, you put Alex Cox's car over at the top there somewhere. Is that right?
I believe that was associated with September the 9th.
Okay. And then down below, there's a road that runs east-west.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then a little ways from the intersection of the north, south, east, west, it looks like a long driveway. Could you touch on that for me?
So you're talking over here?
No, I'm talking a little further right there.
Yes, sir.
And that's a driveway that goes into the property, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've been at the property.
Okay. And then can you point where the location of the fire pit is?
So I believe it was somewhere in this area here. Are
Okay. And there's some sort of a green tree or a tree that's throwing some shade down there next to something brown, right?
you talking about here?
Up to the right there.
Okay.
And that's a tree or some shade of some kind, correct?
It's something I can't remember from my time at the property.
Okay. All right, Judge, that's good for now. Now I want to go back to, I believe it was slide 20. Okay. And Judge, if we could have slide 20 put up there.
All right, slide 20 of exhibit 156. We'll get the exhibit up. You can locate the slide.
So on this particular slide, I noticed that the blue box on the right-hand side says something does not include. Would you read that for me?
Sure. Does not include all activity between 12 a.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. Only locates with 100 meters or less. Margin of error are depicted.
Okay, so the way I'm reading this is that the purple box shows some various times at a location. Is that right?
Correct.
And do you know whose location that is in the purple box?
So that's associated with the Google location history for Alex Cox.
Okay, and where is the location specifically?
So the ones that I believe you're referring to here on the left side.
The purple ones, yeah.
So that's at 2:42 in the morning and 3:37 in the morning, just west of Lori Vallow's apartment.
So they're at or near Lori Vallow's apartment at those times, right?
The device is reporting just west of Lori Vallow's apartment.
Okay, and again, the times are what?
At 2:42 in the morning and then 3:37 in the morning.
And the margin of error on that is what?
4 meters,
12 feet.
approximately.
So close to or in close proximity of Lori Vallow's apartment at that time in the morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, I guess I'm curious. I noticed that you put, and this is on September 9th, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
I noticed that you put down a couple of phones with Chad Daybell, right?
Yes, sir.
You put down a phone with Alex Cox, right?
Yes, sir.
You put down a phone with Lori Vallow.
Yes, sir.
But why aren't you looking at Melanie Gibb and David Warwick?
Your Honor, objection misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
Why aren't you looking at phone records for David Warwick and Melanie Gibb?
So was not asked to examine any records for those two.
Nobody asked you, no one provided that information to you?
I wasn't asked to examine records for those two.
Oh, because
you aware
Melanie Gibb is all
that
up
time-
in this.
At the location of Alex Cox's phone location, and in close proximity on that day, Melanie Gibb and David Warwick were also there. Were you aware?
Objection misstates the evidence.
Abstain.
That is very, very suspicious because the
who provided you this phone data?
prosecution is like defending Melanie
I don't recall
Gibbs.
specifically. I know multiple data
at
sets were
all
sent on different
costs.
occasions from the numerous
And
members of
she's
the investigation team.
sus.
And who in the
She's
investigation
so
team determines what phone records
sus.
you look at?
I don't know. That's right.
Oh,
Okay. So then, at some
she
point, we go
she
to the
like
big yellow circle,
has
is that right?
an attitude
And the phone
because
location is
she
showing in that big yellow
is
circle, correct?
free and
And
clear
how
on
long is that
this.
phone locator hitting in that big yellow circle?
You can hear it
I
from her
believe it was
testimony.
approximately an hour, but
It's like,
again,
I
it's
don't
not showing
know.
on the screen, the bottom part of
I
the
don't
page.
remember.
Now, what you
Yeah,
didn't
I
do,
guess I lied.
I noticed
Whatever.
in your report that you also didn't mention before 12 a.m. on September 9th.
Sus.
Is that right?
Correct.
And are you aware of the phone location prior to 12 o'clock on September 9th?
I could look at it, but I don't recall what that location was.
Now, you didn't have, oops, I'm sorry, Judge, I bumped that, and we can take that down.
I
didn't
know
show
some people don't
Chad Daybell.
like Pryor very much because he is defending this monster of a banana person who has less charisma than a banana, like I just said in my comments. But I think John, the attorney, is doing a great job, and he really is working his butt off. Because if it was most people in his place that were like, this guy's gonna get the death penalty, and there's nothing I can do. But John is really like working, like every single witness, every single cross. He is doing his best and asking great questions and poking holes in the evidence. And I think that it's admirable of him as an attorney for his profession and for him to represent his clients in the future. Not at all because of Chad, because Chad to me is it every day gets clearer and clearer that he's a psychopath and that he did this because of power and money. I buy it. I totally buy it. And I think that he found a way to manipulate these people and they fell for him. And Lori fell for him. And Lori already had Alex at her hands. And they did anything they had to do to get to their goal. Let me pause here for 1 second. I want to show you guys these pictures, some pictures here that I was looking at, because sometimes, honestly, I don't know why. Where did it go? I don't know how Chad has any influence on anybody, okay? But then look at, so let's look at some of his faces, right? Some of the faces, and something that I really like to look at is the eyes, right? Look at this picture. Look at this picture here. Look at his face. And I will say, the signs, superficial charm and charisma is a sign of a psychopath. Let me see if I can find one picture here that Chad is showing some type of personality or charisma or any life itself. Oh, look at this picture. Like freaking monster. Look at this picture. Like a devil right here. Look at how one eye is all the way up like the devil and one is regular. So this means that he's not it's not all him. Look at it. I mean, seriously, I don't like that. Don't like that at all. Let me make this a little bigger because I opened on another window, but you guys can't see. Okay, so here you go. You can see his eye. One is up there and the other one is regular. That's some freaky shits. Let's see what else we got for his Charm and charisma. I don't see no charm. Is this charm? I mean, no. He's not charming at all. What about here when he was a potato? Not charming. No, no, no. So as far as that goes with the charm and charisma from psychopaths, I do not give that to him. Look at his face. He's just so bland. He's so bland. Let me see. Oh, he's smiling here. Oh, the thing smiles. Look at this. I don't know. Signs of a psychopath definitely have the charisma there. I don't see it. So from 20 signs of psychopathy, I'm going to say my opinion is Banana Face does not have any charisma. Does not have any charisma. Now, Lori, on the other hand, she has charisma. She has you can see she has a personality. You know what I mean? Like she has a personality. Look at this. But Chad is like, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. So superficial charm, and then what else? Unnecessary cruelty. Once the superficial charm and charisma wears off, a psychopath will often demonstrate moments of cruelty. Now, definitely, I see some cruelty here because especially the way the kids were found in his backyard, and he used to be a grave digger. Like this guy has experience with digging graves, and the children were found in his backyard. What else do you want? I mean, honestly, I'm all for the defense. I'm always pro defense. I'm always leaning that way. But in this case, I'm not, because it's just so in our faces. The evidence is physical evidence, it's not circumstantial. It's like the bodies were at his house. He used to be a grave digger. What else do you want? Oh, okay. The children were missing, and the next day, Alex was back and forth at his house, frantically, and then calling Lori right away. Like, guys, no. No. This one, I definitely think we have a lot of evidence here. So let's go back, see if we are
Daybell's location on
almost
September
done
23rd, anywhere
with
near those
this
apartments. Is that correct?
because they are going to talk.
I don't believe I did. I'd have to go back and look at the report to see. I think that was only on September the 9th.
And then in regards to the text messaging that you talked about, we don't know what the contents of that text message between all these folks was discussing, correct?
We do not.
And you testified previously that it wasn't uncommon for Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to frequently be communicating, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, on a daily basis, multiple communications in the morning, correct?
I remember seeing significant amount of communications between the two.
And significant amount of communications in the evenings as well, right?
I believe there was evening hours as well. I would just need to examine the records in total to give you like approximate time.
Are you aware that the two of those folks were having an affair?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. And you're aware as part of that affair that they'd be communicating. Wouldn't you expect them to be communicating quite regularly?
I would expect that to be the case, yes, sir.
Okay.
Did you know my
On those days that you talked
client
about with,
was having an
Alex Cox being
affair?
on the property on September 6th, September 25th, October 15th.
But
Did you happen to
said that
notice
he
where
was
Chad
a
Daybell was on those days?
prophet and a
don't
leader
recall
of
what
the
the
Okay.
church.
You didn't look into that, right?
I don't recall looking into that. No.
Okay. All right. Judge, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
All right, that concludes
All
the
right.
cross-examination then. Mr. Wood, if
Great,
you'd like to have
everybody's
redirected.
done.
Just briefly.
No more
All right.
questions. Let's go to the next witness, guys.
All right, we'll have Exhibit 156 returned to the clerk, please. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff.
Thank you.
Yeah, proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Agent, you were asked by defense counsel about your margin of error.
Yes, sir, I was.
I think we kind of went over that a little bit earlier, but can you again describe for the jury why you used 100 meters margin of error?
Sure. So typically with Google locations, like I mentioned, you can see margin of error all the way from 3 meters all the way up to thousands of meters. And so if there's a specific date and time that I'm looking at, I find it to be much more precise to look at those 100 meters or less, because it gives me a good indicator of where that phone was at that particular time. Now, with that, it's reporting from a cell phone. So when you start getting into larger margin of error, I also have records associated with that phone that can aid in mapping where that phone was as well. So again, it's just a matter of being as precise as possible whenever I'm conducting analysis.
Okay, I'm gonna fast
So,
forward
as a
this. Do we got the next witness? Oh, got a break, and oh, she's being sworn in, and this is, I believe, Hannah Parker.
All right, the witness has been sworn. Before we proceed with testimony, because there's an exclusionary order and the court has live streamed this trial as well as had open proceedings for the trial, I'll inquire of the witness. Have you been observing or watched any of the trial testimony since the case started?
No.
Okay. Have you talked to anybody else about testimony they've given in trial?
No.
Okay. With that, then,
We
Mr.
can
Woodson, you
see
can inquire
her.
under arrest.
She's right
Thank you, Your
there.
Honor. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Ms. Munoz. Will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Yes, it's Hannah Nicole Parker, H-A-N-N-A-H, Nicole,
Parker.
N-I-C-O-L-E, Parker, P-A-R.
Tammy's
And do
family.
you want me to refer to you as Ms. Munoz or Ms. Parker?
Ms. Munoz.
Can you tell us where you live?
I live in Vineyard, Utah.
Where is that in Utah for the sake of the jury? Explain that to them, please.
It's about 45 minutes south of Salt Lake.
And is that anywhere near Springville, Utah?
Yes, it's about 15 minutes from Springville.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Springville.
And what do you do for work?
First, my apologies. Could I have you kind of pull the mic down and just talk right into it? It doesn't.
Oh,
pick up
Judge,
very well.
stop
Just talk to me. Thank you.
interrupting. Come on.
What do you do for work?
I'm a freelance photographer.
Are you related to Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
How are you related to her?
She's my mom's cousin, so my second cousin.
That'd be your mom's first cousin?
Yes.
Oh,
I want to draw your attention back to October 19th of 2019. Did you that day learn of Tammy's passing?
Yes.
How did you learn about it?
I was with my mom and she received a phone call and then told me about it after.
What was your reaction to hearing that she passed?
I was very saddened by the news and very confused and just overall very sad.
I'd like to back up a little bit. Can you explain to the jury how often, if at all, did you have contact with Tammy during your childhood?
I didn't know Tammy super well. Like we saw her at family events. But I was younger, so I was like playing with her kids. But yeah, we'd see them at family activities.
So you learned of her passing. Did you have occasion to attend her funeral?
Yes, I did.
The best you can recall, when was her funeral relative to her passing?
It was a week after her passing-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you also attend a viewing?
Yes, I did.
And where was the viewing at?
It was at a church house in Springville.
Is that the same place the funeral was held?
Yes.
When you went to the viewing, did you go by
He
yourself? or did
has
you go
no
with friends?
emotions.
I went with my sister and then I met family at the viewing.
What other
Just a
family did you meet?
shell of a
I
human
had my
being.
grandparents there, some aunts and uncles, and then my mom and dad came later.
Did you have the opportunity while at that viewing to go through the viewing line?
Yes, I did.
How many times do you recall going through it that night?
I went through twice.
Who did you go through with the first time?
I went through with my dad, Lindsay Parker, first.
And do you recall was Chad Daybell in the viewing line?
Yes.
Relative to where Chad was, were there any of the Daybell children that were also in the line?
Yes.
Where were they at relative to where Chad was at in the line?
Chad was first in line, and then there was a casket, so he was at the head, and then the kids were at her feet, about 6 feet away from Chad.
Based on your own perception, do you think that any conversation that you may have had with Chad in that moment would have been heard or been able to have been heard by the children?
No.
So when you were in the line with your dad, did the two of you have a conversation with Mr. Daybell?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury the nature of that conversation?
Yeah. So my dad asked him what had happened. That said that he was
Judge,
confused.
I'm going to object. There's levels of hearsay here.
Well, if they're,
True.
Mr. Wexman, if they're soliciting comments of the defendant, would be an exception. If they're comments of the father, it would be hearsay. So I'm not sure where the witness is going with this. Maybe you can direct witness to avoid that hearsay.
I will, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So just in context of what Chad may have said in that conversation, can you explain to the jury what you first remember him saying about anything?
Not for the truth
Yeah,
of the
he
matter.
said that Tammy had been sick that day. He said that she had been vomiting and coughing. And then around 10 p.m., she had vomited again and then came to his office and said that she was feeling a little bit better. And he said that she was going to bed and that he stayed in his office working. And then around 1 a.m., he
Is
went
he
upstairs
smiling?
and found Tammy on
Is
the
he
floor. And
smiling?
he said that she had rolled out of the bed and was on the floor and that he found her cold and already passed.
So that was a lot of information just for clarity. I'm going to ask some follow-up. So when you said he described this, was he talking about the night that she passed?
Yes.
Okay.
Is
I
he
think you said that she
smiling?
came to him at 10 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes.
What time do you remember, if at all, that he said that Tammy went to bed that night?
He said Tammy went to bed around 10,
And what time was it that you said he finally went to bed himself?
around 1 a.m.
And when was it that he said that he found Tammy on the floor, passed away?
I swear he
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like he's smiling.
So is there any question in your mind that that's precisely what he
He's
said?
happy.
During that interaction with him, did you observe anything about his tone or demeanor?
Yes.
What did you notice?
I noticed that he seemed calmer than I would have expected, and that he would get emotional only when my dad would get emotional and then would stop, like once he would stop crying.
Why did that stand out to you?
It stood out to me because I would have expected someone who just lost their partner to be a little more distraught, and he seemed calmer than I would have expected him to be.
And in fact, are you married?
Yes.
Now, later that evening, you said, I think earlier, that you also went through the line with your mother?
Yes.
About how long after the time you went through with your dad did you also go through the line with your mother?
About 2 hours.
Could you
Oh,
please just
sorry,
explain to the jury
sorry,
your
sorry,
experience when you went
sorry.
through the line with your mother?
Yes. So they were talking, and Chad was telling us what happened, and he said that she had been coughing that day, and that she'd been coughing pretty violently, so he was worried about her. Between 9 and 10, she came down to his office and said that she was going to rest and go to bed. He said that he was worried about her, so he went to bed at the same time. And then at around midnight, he woke up to her rolling out of bed and hitting the floor. He said that he went to check on her and had found that she had passed.
What was your immediate reaction when you heard that account of things?
I was confused at first.
Why?
Because it was inconsistent with what I had heard earlier that evening.
Did you say anything at that time?
No.
Did you ask Chad any questions about the explanations at the time?
No.
Why not?
I was confused, and I also didn't feel comfortable. The conversation was being had between Chad and my parents.
So without saying anything that she may have said in response, did you later explain this difference to your mother?
Yes.
And to anybody else?
To my mom and then later to Samantha
When did you first explain it to your mom?
that night after the viewing.
No, I don't have any more questions for this witness at this time.
Wait, did I miss where she said
examination, that's correct.
something?
Good afternoon.
Let me go back.
Ma'am,
Let me go back.
Yes, I did.
And where was the viewing at?
It was at a church house in Springville.
Is that the same place the funeral was held?
Yes.
When you went to the viewing, did you go by yourself or did you go with anybody else?
I went with my sister and then I met family at the viewing.
What other family did you meet at the viewing?
I had my grandparents there, some aunts and uncles, and then my mom and dad came later.
Did you have the opportunity while at that viewing to go through the viewing line?
Yes, I did.
How many times do you recall going through it that night?
I went through twice.
Who did you go through with the first time?
I went through with my dad, Lindsay Parker, first.
And do you recall, was Chad Daybell in the viewing line?
Yes.
Relative to where Chad was, were there any of the Daybell children that were also in the line?
Yes.
Where were they at relative to where Chad was at in the line?
Chad was first in line, and then there was a casket, so he was at the head, and then the kids were at her feet, about 6 feet away from Chad.
Based on your own perception, do you think that any conversation that you may have had with Chad in that moment would have been heard or been able to have been heard by the children?
No.
So when you were in the line with your dad, did the two of you have a conversation with Mr. Daybell?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury the nature of that conversation?
Yeah. So my dad asked him what had happened. That said that he was
Judge,
confused.
I'm going to object. There's levels of hearsay here.
Well,
Okay.
if they're, Mr. Wixom, if they're soliciting comments of the defendant, would be an exception. If they're comments of the father, it would be hearsay. So I'm not sure where the witness is going with this. Maybe you can direct the witness to avoid that hearsay.
I will, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, just in context of what Chad may have said in that conversation, can you explain to the jury what you first remember him saying about anything?
Yeah, he said that Tammy had been sick that day. He said that she had been vomiting and coughing. And then around 10 p.m., she had vomited again and then came to his office and said that she was feeling a little bit better. And he said that she was going to bed and that he stayed in his office working. And then around 1 a.m., he went upstairs and found Tammy on the floor. And he said that she had rolled out of the bed and was on the floor and that he found her cold and already passed.
So that was a lot of information. Just for clarity, I'm going to ask some follow-up. So when you said he described this, was he talking about the night that she passed?
Yes.
I think you said that she came to him at 10 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes.
What time do you remember, if at all, that he said that Tammy went to bed that night?
He said Tammy went to bed around 10,
And what time was it that you said he finally went to bed himself?
around 1 a.m.,
And when was it that he said that he found Tammy on the floor, passed away?
around 1 a.m.
So is there any question in your mind that that's precisely what he said?
No.
During that
So he
interaction with
found
him,
her at
did you observe
10?
anything about his tone or demeanor?
So he found her dead at 10 and then he went to bed at 1.
Yes.
What did you notice?
I noticed that he seemed calmer than I would have expected, and that he would get emotional only when my dad would get emotional and then would stop, like once my dad stopped crying.
Why did that stand out to you?
He can't have
It
emotions,
stood out to
guys.
me because I would have expected someone who just lost their partner to be a little more distraught,
Yeah.
and he seemed calmer than I would have expected him to be.
And in
And then
fact, are
he's
you
like,
married?
"Oh, you're
Yes.
crying. I should be crying. Let me copy you."
Now, later that evening, you said, I think earlier, that you'd also went through the line with your mother.
Yes.
About how long after the time you went through with your dad did you also go through the line with your mother?
About 2 hours.
Could you please just explain to the jury your experience when you went through the line with your mother?
Yes. So they were talking and Chad was telling us what happened. And he said that she had been coughing that day, and that she'd been coughing pretty violently. So he was worried about her. Between 9 and 10, she came down to his office and said that she was going to rest and go to bed. He said that he was worried about her, so he went to bed at the same time. And then at around midnight, he woke up to her rolling out of bed and hitting the floor. He said that he went to check on her and had found that she had passed.
What was your immediate reaction when you heard that account of things?
Different?
I was confused at first.
Why?
Because it was inconsistent with what I had heard earlier that evening.
Right.
Did you say anything at that time?
No,
Did you ask Chad any questions about the explanations at the time?
no.
Why not?
I was confused and I also didn't feel comfortable. The conversation was being had between Chad and my parents.
So without saying anything that she may have said in response, did you later explain this difference to your mother
Yes.
and to anybody else?
To my mom and then later to Samantha
When did you first explain it to your mom?
that night after the viewing.
No, I don't have any more questions for this witness at this time.
All right.
Okay. And probably better be careful because this is a victim's family and you don't want to come
Cross-examination.
on
Mr.
too
Pryor.
aggressively.
Ma'am, this information, did you ever give a report to law enforcement?
Yes.
When did you do that?
In August of 2020.
Have you spoken to anybody else since August of 2020 about this in terms of law enforcement?
I've met with investigators a few times.
How many times?
Twice.
Okay. Do you recall when those were?
I don't.
Okay. Did you talk to the prosecuting attorney before you decided to testify today?
Yes.
Okay. When did you meet with the prosecuting attorney?
I met with him once about a month ago, and then this morning.
And which prosecutor did you meet with?
Rocky.
Rocky. Do you know Rocky?
Outside of court proceedings, no.
Okay. Now, your testimony is that at midnight, Tammy went downstairs to check on Chad in his office. Is that right? Objection misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
Did you mention about him going downstairs to meet with Tammy going downstairs to meet with Chad at any point?
Yes.
Okay. What did you make reference to?
When I was talking to Chad with my father,
Yeah.
he said that Tammy had gone down to say that she had thrown up and was feeling a little better and then was going to bed.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So Tammy was upstairs in her bedroom, and then she went downstairs to go into an office to talk to Chad. Is that what you understood?
yes.
Okay. Are you aware that this is a one-story home, ma'am?
No, I've never been to their home.
Okay. And then after, again, when you were in the line with your mother, and you mentioned something about going downstairs, which downstairs were we going to?
Again, I haven't been to their home.
Okay. Nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Ma'am, is there any question in your mind that you testified as accurately as you possibly can today?
Judge, I'm going to object. It goes beyond cross-examination.
Well, I'll sustain. I think that's actually an improper question. You can ask a different question if you like, Mr. Wixom.
Ma'am, when you heard Mr. Daybell explain the events with your dad, did your dad ask him anything about the layout of the home?
No.
Did you ask him anything?
No.
Are you, do you doubt at all that he said that he?
Judge, I'm going to object. He's trying to bolster the witness. It's inappropriate.
I'll let you
Bolster.
finish the question, Mr. Wixom, and then I'll rule.
Okay. Is there any question in your mind that what Chad said to your dad was that Tammy had went downstairs?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
That will conclude the testimony then of Ms. Munoz. Is she going to be recalled potentially by either side?
Not by the state, Your Honor.
Not by the defense, Judge. Thank you.
Okay, if you're here under any subpoena, you're released from the subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying today. You can be excused.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
All right, the state can call its next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call Patty later.
The state calls Patricia later.
How do you
Tammy's.
spell that last name, Mr. Wixom?
I believe
Her
it's
cousin.
Later.
Thank you.
So that could be her mother, Hannah's mother. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. And let's see what she's gonna say. Patricia later. Tammy's cousin. Oh man. What about him? What is he doing? What is he doing with his face? He's just looking at the computer. Yeah, because you can't face her, right? Well, I guess if he's a psychopath, he doesn't really care, right? He
All right, the witness
actually
has been
enjoys
sworn
the
before,
suffering of
we'll start
others.
with direct, I am going to inquire, because this court's being live streamed as well as open to the public. I need
Thank
to ask
you,
the witness,
Judge.
have you observed or watched the trial in any way? No. Okay, have you discussed anybody else's testimony with them that they've given at trial?
No.
Okay, thanks for your responses, Mr. Wixom. You can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state your full name and spell it for the record?
It's Patricia Later, Patricia.
Not now, later.
Later.
Thank you. And ma'am, where do you live?
I live in Spanish Fork, Utah,
Where is that relative to Springville, Utah?
just south of it.
Patricia later.
Have you ever lived in Springville, Utah?
Patricia later,
years.
later.
Which years did you live there?
From let's see, 1995 or 1996 until after high school, and then I moved to Denver and then came back and lived. I've lived there.
Ma'am, are you related to Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I'm her first cousin.
Yes.
And did you have a strong relationship with her when you were younger?
Sorry,
Aww.
I did. We were 7 months apart, and
Look at him. No emotion.
we pretty much were like sisters.
This speaks
Um,
volume.
grew up to
me.
with each other.
Could you take a moment, just expand to the jury on that? How much time did you spend with her? How well did you know her growing up?
Speaks volume.
My mom was a single mom, and my aunt Phyllis, her sister, used to watch us. And then as we got older, they lived in Anaheim and we lived in LA. I'd go out and spend weeks during the summer with her, and we went on family
I
trips
mean,
together.
Chad
At
was
one point,
married
we
to
wrote letters
Tammy
back and
for
forth to,
years. I
plan a
believe
show for a camping trip we were going to go on.
20 years or
And then,
something. I
um,
can look it up.
When I moved to Springville, we went to high school
and
together. We were best friends.
No emotion.
Drove to school every day. She encouraged me to
Her
join
cousin,
band,
just to hear
even though
her
I didn't play an
name,
instrument
got extremely
so we
emotional.
could be together and go on a trip to California with the band.
He's
and
just looking at her like,
um,
what am I supposed to do?
also
Like,
she encouraged me to take some classes with her, so we'd have classes together too.
So am I hearing correct? Did you attend high school together?
That's correct.
Did you do any other social activities with her in high school?
We did lots of stuff. We went on double dates together. We pretty much hung out on the weekends together, watching movies or whatever kind of thing we do.
As adults, have you stayed in contact with each other prior to her passing?
Yes. When she lived in Springville, I used to go visit her. Well,
Chad was married for
when I lived
over
in Springville, we worked at
28
the same school, elementary
years.
school, Art City Elementary, for about 2 years, I think. Art City Elementary. And she was a computer tech and I was teaching. I taught 5th grade for a year and then I taught 3rd grade. And she would come down and leave little notes. She would leave little notes for me with like inside jokes. I still have one in my nightstand. Excuse me. I would visit her at home
Aw,
sometimes
poor
and
thing.
just I'd be out driving and I could just stop by and we'd chat with each other and visit.
Do you recall which years it was that you worked together at that school?
It had to be 2010. So when I graduated, so 2010 to I worked there 2010 to 2016. And
Chad
she had,
shows
left a
absolutely
couple years
no
before that.
emotion.
Were there other years during that same time frame that you lived in Springville when Tammy did?
Yes.
That
What years were
speaks
those, the best you can
volumes.
recall?
I'm
That I
sorry,
lived in
John
Springville?
Pryor.
That you were
I
both
mean, I know
living in
you're doing the
Springville at the
best
same
you can, but look at
Um,
his face.
That whole time. So I can't recall what year she moved to Utah or to Idaho. Sorry.
After she moved to Idaho, how often did you have contact with her?
At first it was like every couple of weeks, and then it kind of went down to a month. She just, I don't know, just didn't talk as much anymore. We would text each other back and forth if like we heard a song that we used to listen to, or we both liked Harrison Ford. So if something on the news was with Harrison Ford, we'd send each other the links and things like that.
Did you attend any funeral? Or sorry, did you attend any family gatherings together, any weddings or any occasions like that?
During that time?
Yes.
She came to my wedding in 2016, and then we attended a couple during the time she was in Idaho. Sorry, are you talking about when she was in Idaho?
Any time since the time she moved to Idaho.
That she came to my wedding was probably the only time.
Okay. I want to draw your attention back to October 19th of 2019. Did you learn of Tammy's passing that day?
Yes, I did.
How did you learn of it?
My mom called me.
Poor thing.
My mom called me on the phone, and she was crying hysterically and told me Tammy passed. And it didn't register who she said because it didn't make sense that my cousin Tammy had passed. So I said, "Who passed, Mom?" And she said Tammy, and I still didn't make sense. And I said, who are you saying? And she said, Phyllis, my Aunt Phyllis. Phyllis called and told me that Tammy passed.
Why was that confusing to you?
Because she was fine.
Just didn't make any sense.
Why not?
She was so young and healthy.
Did you have the
Stupid
opportunity
face.
to attend her funeral and viewing?
Yes, I did. I attended both the viewing on Monday and the viewing prior to the funeral on Tuesday.
Which Monday and Tuesday relative to the day she passed, do you remember?
The ones following it was really quick.
And
He
did
can't
you
show
did
an
attend the
emotion.
evening viewing
He's
on Monday?
just like,
That is correct.
Who did you attend it with?
he's like,
I went alone. I had, when I found out she was passed, I actually was on fall break in California. So I flew back on Monday. I think my flight got in like 5:45.
is
And
this
then
Chad?
I went to the funeral or the viewing after that.
When you were there, did you see your daughter Hannah?
Yeah. So when I walked in,
Is
I
he
was
breathing?
really upset
Does he breathe?
and kind of looked for someone comforting, like some family.
And did you and Hannah have the opportunity to go through the viewing line?
That's
Yes,
Chad.
we did.
Look at
Were
him.
you standing next to each other when you did that?
Nothing.
Yeah,
No
she was-
movement, no breathing,
she
no
was right next to me,
nothing,
but,
no nothing, no
Did you see
emotion.
Chad in that viewing line?
I did.
Did you observe anything about his emotional state or demeanor that night?
Which emotional state?
When I was going through, he was just talking with people, and when someone would cry, he would cry, but he was mostly just visiting with whoever was coming up to him.
Did anything about the way he was acting strike you as unusual?
I felt like I felt like he should have been more sad, I guess.
Did you, at that point in time, did you engage him in any conversation?
Well, I had gone through the line really quick the first time, and then the second time, I went through and hugged her kids, and then walked past the casket, and then went and talked to Chad.
Was Hannah with you when you went to talk to Chad?
Yeah, she was.
Can you explain to the jury, what was it that you and Chad talked about? What did Chad say?
I just went up to him and told him I was sorry for his loss, and we hugged, and I asked him what happened.
Did he say?
He said that Tammy wasn't feeling well and she was coughing a lot, and she threw up. Well, he asked if she was okay. She threw up, and she came to tell him that she threw up and that she was going to bed. He asked her if she was okay, and she said yes, she's feeling better after she threw up, and then she went to bed. And then we both started crying, and then before I left him, he told me that Tammy loved you so much.
Did he say anything else or more specifically about how he found that Tammy had passed away that night?
Yeah, he said that he had so she went to bed, and he stayed up working, and then he went to bed later. I think he said Tammy went to bed around 10 o'clock, and he went to bed later, and then he woke up in the morning because she rolled out of bed or fell out of bed, and that's what woke him up.
Anything else that you can remember in that conversation that he described about how he found Tammy?
She was kind of half on and half off the bed.
The next day, did you have the opportunity to attend Tammy's funeral service?
Yes, I did.
Was that held at the same place?
Yes, yeah, at the church.
When you attended the service, did you happen to hear Chad speak?
I did.
Was there anything about his talk or speak at the funeral service that caused you concern or stuck out to you?
Yeah, there was a couple things that he said that I just thought weren't very nice.
What were those things?
What did he say?
He said that the first thing he said was that she wasn't easy to live with. He said that she was lazy.
What?
He said that she had depression, which she did, but to say it out in front of the whole
In her funeral?
congregation, I thought was
That is
I guess
insane.
embarrassing for her. I don't know.
That is insane.
So why were those things of concern to you?
I just didn't think they were very nice.
Was there anything about his demeanor at the funeral service before, during, or after speaking that you noticed?
I noticed after Emma
What
told
the
a story
F?
about
What
Tammy
the
wanting more
F?
pets, and that she would just kind of sneak them in.
Douchebag.
I looked
Douchebag
over at him, and he
face.
kind of looked like a little concerned, and then he was laughing about it. And then
Laughing.
When you say him,
Look,
did you mean
look at
Chad?
his
Yes, that's
stupid face
and
right
then
now.
Garth told a
And
story about
Pryor's like, great.
Tammy playing video games, and he would be her lookout for when Chad got home. And same thing, he looked kind of like concerned, and then he started laughing. But it was like
What kind
like a
of
split
piece
second,
of
'cause
crap?
I looked over at him to see.
What kind of piece of crap of a person says anything negative about another person at their funeral? That's it. I mean, the mountains of evidence against this guy are just astounding. Okay. And the fact that he has no emotions during this testimony when the cousin is talking about his wife of 28 years, he's almost smiling. That is the nail on the coffin, no pun intended, in my opinion, that he is a psychopath. He doesn't have emotions. He doesn't have any accountability. He doesn't feel any remorse. And he goes to his wife's funeral and says that she's lazy, that she's difficult to. Who does that? Who does that? Honestly, I am done with Chad. I'm done. I'm done with Chad. I mean, never have I ever wanted somebody to be guilty before the trial was over. And I mean, he deserves everything he's getting.
If that was upset him, because I would, I guess, be upset too, but he just laughed it off too. Sure.
Oh, he
Why did
laughed
those
it
things
off.
that Emma and Seth had shared,
That's
why were they a concern
funny.
to you?
Ha ha ha. Let's laugh it off
So
at
it
your
was,
face.
Emma and Garth. I just
Look who's laughing now.
I just felt like they had to hide what they were doing. Tammy had to hide what she was doing from Chad.
What do you mean by that?
Like to be careful to not get in trouble, I guess.
She was
in trouble
afraid of
too.
being herself because he's a freaking psychopath.
Were there occasion when
Poor
Chad
Tammy.
and Tammy lived
She
in
should have
Springville
escaped.
that you would go over to visit Tammy at her house?
Yes.
When you would go visit her, was there anything that you would notice in those interactions that caused you any concern about Chad?
Could I have some foundation as to time, date, year?
Mr. Wexton.
Sure.
Just overall.
With respect to that question, can you think of a time that you went to Tammy's house and the best you
Yeah,
can recall, let's
Christmas.
tell the court and the
2
jury,
years
what year
ago.
did this happen?
So it was the same years that we lived in Springville, 1995 to till the time she moved to Idaho.
So is it fair to say that you would visit her often at their home?
Yeah, at least once a month, if not more.
Were there any particular visits that you had that stand out that you ever had concerns with Chad's behavior? And I'm asking you to try to recall when these were, if you can.
I don't know specific dates, but when I would go visit, normally I just visit when Chad wasn't there, and I would stop by for a quick visit, and then it would end up being hours, and we'd visit about our kids and old memories and whatever. And eventually Chad would get home. He would come in and sit next to her and put his hand on her knee and visit. But I always kind of got a feeling that I needed to go home, like at that time.
Did he ever ask you to leave, or
No.
that was the feeling?
Just a feeling.
Was that a consistent thing that would happen when you go to her home?
Yes.
Was there ever anything that you were aware of that you had any tension or relationship issues with Chad that might make him feel that way?
No.
Your Honor, I don't have any more questions.
All right, thanks, Mr. Wexton.
All right, let's see what Pryor's gonna do, because I mean, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? She's a victim's family crying, and your
Cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Judge.
client's
Ms.
a
Later, it sounds from what
psychopath.
you testified to that you and Tammy knew each other quite well as you were both growing up at a young age, right?
That is correct.
And then in 2015, when Tammy and Chad moved with the family to Utah, that contact dissipated quite a bit. Would that be fair?
Yes, when they moved to Idaho, that happened.
Right. And would it surprise you to learn that we have Tammy's phone records and correspondence, all her electronic data?
And you
Would
never
it surprise you
spoke
to learn
her.
that in the last year of her life, we don't have any communications between you and her of any kind?
So what?
I don't think
Pryor?
I feel like that's not correct.
Okay.
So
You feel
what?
it's not correct, or do you know that there was no communication between you and her the last year of her life?
We would
Doesn't
message
matter.
on Facebook and text. I don't think that's correct.
Okay. So it's Facebook is what you're telling me. That's how you communicated with her?
Probably.
and-
Who
yeah.
cares? Doesn't matter. She's a victim's
And she
family.
declined.
Now,
Don't
when you were on the
press
line
her.
on the first day of the services, you mentioned that you were there with your daughter, correct? Or with Miss Munoz.
I came in by myself, and then she came up to me.
But you were standing there with Miss Munoz when you went through the line together, is that right?
Mhm.
And at that point, what your testimony is that Chad told you at the time that he woke up in the morning and Tammy had fallen out of bed in the morning. Is that correct?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
That Tammy fell out of the bed and that she had passed away, and then that he discovered her in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that she had been having a coughing fit all night. Is that right?
She had been coughing prior to bed. Yes.
Okay. And while you and Miss Munoz were standing there together, was there any discussion about Tammy or Chad going upstairs or downstairs in the house?
I can't recall.
Okay. So you don't recall that ever happening?
I don't recall. I
Okay.
don't remember it.
Okay, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, stop it right now,
Can you
John.
direct-
Stop
no.
it, stop it,
Okay,
and
does
stop
either
it.
side intend to recall the witness?
Judge, the state may call her in rebuttal.
All right. With that in mind then, so there is an order, Ms. Later, that prohibits witnesses from watching other witnesses' testimony during the trial, so please comply with that. In the event you're recalled, I'll be asking you if you have watched any of the other trial proceedings since you testified today. If you have watched them, then there might be an issue with you being able to testify or violating that court order. So with that will conclude then your testimony. You can go ahead and step down.
Thanks, Your Honor.
And I think we're almost done here. We're almost done.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Approach. Chad continues to stand there, emotionless, just watching whatever, like a pen. He doesn't have any reaction to any of this. So It is what it is. While we wait for the judge, to come back and release us for the day, we're going to do a little recap today. The first witness we had was Special Agent Nick Balance, FBI cell phone analyst, who pinpoints where Alex Cox's phone was when Tylee disappeared, then when JJ disappeared, and also the fact that he would leave his house in the middle of the night, go to Chad's house, spend some time with Chad, then later leave. And then as soon as he left, Chad would call Lori, Alex would call Lori to give her an update. Okay, whatever that means. Then we also heard from Hannah Nicole Parker, who is Tammy Daybell's second cousin. And she mentioned that she went to the funeral, and she was there with her father, and they asked Chad what happened, and that Chad would get emotional if her father was emotional, but pretty much that he just said that Tammy was sick, she was vomiting, she died, and he would say that he found her at 10 o'clock and went to bed at 1. And then later he said he found her at midnight and went straight to bed. So who knows what's true, what's not, right? And then the third and last witness that we just heard from, very emotional testimony, Patricia later, Tammy Daybell's first cousin, who is deeply emotional during her testimony when she talks about her memories with her cousin Tammy. And she talks about her fond memories and the things that they used to do together, their bond that they have, and also that Tammy was kind of fearful about being herself around Chad in the house, and she would hide certain behaviors. And the worst of all of today was
All right, thank you.
hearing. Okay,
Ms.
hold
Blake,
on.
we had a sidebar there just discussing scheduling and the court's inquiry as to whether or not we're going to have another witness on the stand
Let's
today.
hear
Could you
the
address that, please?
judge.
Yes, Your Honor. The state had requested a sidebar and had indicated to the court that today moved a little quicker than anticipated, where we had agreed to take tomorrow as a day off from the trial. The state's next witnesses, in order to
Yay!
accommodate their schedules, we have lay witnesses traveling from out of the area and an expert witness that we anticipate putting on the
Okay,
stand
so you don't
Wednesday.
got nothing.
Because of that, and with tomorrow being off, in order to avoid holding witnesses over, we have them prepared to come in Wednesday.
You
We should
got
have
nothing.
the rest of the week filled with witnesses, but given tomorrow being off and just how quickly we moved through things today, we would be requesting to convene today, but reconvene Wednesday morning and then have a full week of
All
witnesses.
right, just
And
say you
leave it-
got
All
nothing.
right, we did discuss that in a sidebar with counsel. Mr. Pryor, any other comments to add on our scheduling before I address the jurors?
No, Judge.
Okay, well, I'll just note it is complicated and complex to schedule for a trial that goes this length and try to anticipate how long or short witnesses may be. So unfortunately, while we certainly got plenty of time to continue on this afternoon, we'll need to break early to accommodate that. I
Oh,
would just ask both the
shucks.
state and the defense to
Shucks,
acknowledge how important the jurors' time is and that we keep things moving as quickly and efficiently as we can to get through the trial. But with that, I do understand the complexities of putting all this together.
Thanks, Judge.
And so if you'll be mindful as possible of that to fill these days to get as much evidence as we can so the trial doesn't extend longer than necessary, the court, and I'm sure the jurors would appreciate that. With that in mind,
Okay.
then we are going to conclude for today. We'll be recommencing with more testimony starting Wednesday morning. We will not have court tomorrow.
Yeah.
With that break, then I'll again admonish the jurors, please continue to abide by the
You're
court's
cut off
instruction that you
tomorrow.
not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. While you're on this break, please do not investigate the case, look into the case in any way. If you see any media or any other reporting of the case,
Close
please
your
try to
eyes.
avoid that. And I look forward to seeing you all again Wednesday morning at
Thank
8:30.
you, Judge.
That will conclude our court for today, and we'll be in recess.
All rise. Okay, so just finishing up that train of thought, right? The worst part of today's testimony was that when Tammy's cousin had to say that Chad at her funeral got up and said his dead wife of 28 years was lazy, depressed, and difficult to live with. What a piece of crap, right? What a piece of crap to not have the sensibility, to not have the compassion, the empathy, to not have the empathy to just keep quiet. Even if you're happy that your wife died, just keep quiet because other people love her and they're here showing their sympathy and their support and suffering together from missing their friend and family member. If you don't have any empathy and you're such a smart guy, which I don't think you are, why don't you just stay the F quiet? Why don't you just do that? Because it's the worst form of anything, even manners, to have manners, right? You don't offend people. You don't say things like that. How are you going to go above and beyond and do that at her funeral? That to me just crushed everything. And also the fact that he did not react at all to her testimony. He had no emotions. She's crying about missing her cousin, his ex-wife of 28 years, and he just looks like a banana. Like he doesn't even seem to be breathing. So when we talk about psychopaths, they are callous, detached from emotions. They don't have them. So what do? They understand at an early age what they are. They understand that they're different than other people because they see other people crying. They see other people having fun and smiling and being happy. And they don't understand why they're doing that with their faces. Like they don't understand because they don't feel that way. So they understand they're different. And in order to conform with society, they learn how to copy behaviors, emotions, feelings, words, and that's how they survive. They become very good at copying, but at the end of the day, they don't know how to feel. So when somebody's crying because his wife is dead, he's thinking, oh, let me cry, let me become emotional. But as soon as the guy stops, Chad stops. So that's to me the detachment today was unbelievable. And we're going to end here, but I'll see you next time. We're going to do the marathon of the trial. We're going to get caught up, and we're going to relate how his behavior, how his body language, how his words, right, relate with the traits of a psychopath. I believe he is very well in that description because he shows over and over again behaviors, body languages, lack of emotional response, lack of empathy, lack of anything. And we can verify that with our eyes, even just by watching the trial, but even more when going through the evidence and listening to what is going on in his text messages and his words and his behavior. So I really appreciate that you have spent this time with me. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time.